And we're back. Coalition Purple on the air. And
Hey,
John, you're
see you, Bill?
looking really good on your phone today. So
Yeah,
we're-
make do with what you can.
yeah,
Make it work.
yeah. We all crash at some point with our computers, and but actually, it's looking really good, and you're sounding good. So, hey, it might be your new go-to.
Hey, at least if nothing else, it's good to know that I have some sort of backup if I need to do it. And it also means that I could be out in the middle of nowhere, so long as I have a signal, I could just record the thing on my phone. I mean, who knew?
Yeah, there you go. So there's always an upside, right? Anyways, so what's going on?
Oh,
Anything
not a whole
that's
lot.
intriguing you this week?
Well, a few things, that I've sort of been thinking about that are sort of like a little bit far afield. And one of them would be Social Security. Because it's, basically what it comes down to is, there's so much in the news about, everything that Trump and Musk are going through and finding and publishing and, sort of the way we look at things sort of a little bit differently or not publishing. As I say, actually, that's a really good point that I was kind of thinking that it would be worth saying is like, it's funny. The Trump administration wants to claim that it's being transparent, and I think it is being transparent about some things. And Trump is certainly more available to the press than obviously Biden ever was.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that they're telling us everything. And it's one of those you don't know what you don't know kind of things. I mean,
yep.
What else could be out there?
Right.
But basically, it was Social Security and some of the court decisions that have been coming out, and the very recent decision from the Supreme Court to sort of toss the temporary restraining order back to the basic court, back to the district court.
Right.
And I think those things are really interesting from the big picture standpoint. Have you been following any of that stuff, or are you interested in that?
Oh, totally. No, it's fascinating because, and I'll go on my diatribe at some point, but it's been fascinating just to see this whole process of on again, off again, and and all of that. But yeah, no, it's been interesting. My guess is, well, some of these things the Supreme Court just as soon somebody else take the fall for
it. You and I think, are on the same page. So I can't say that I really dislike John Roberts, but I just find him incredibly aggravating. So, the recent thing that came into the Supreme Court,
quick question for me,
it was the TRO about dispersing something like $2 billion to researchers and medical scientists dealing with AIDS in Africa. And the thing about it was, there are a lot of legal issues that sort of surround these temporary restraining orders, and how they're used, how they affect the functioning of the executive branch, whether or not the courts have jurisdiction over these kind of things. So tons and tons of stuff.
Okay.
And so what is Robert's ruling, as usual? The deadline's already expired, so we might as well just chuck it back to the district court.
Well,
thanks,
really
Justice Roberts. That's real helpful. That provided a ton of clarity for what's going on. Thank God we have a Supreme Court that just reset the clock and send it back down to the district court. It's like, come on, there's got to be more of a ruling than that. It's just like you're doing nothing.
At the bottom line of all those, many of these cases, maybe not most, but many of them, is really trying to sort out what truly the balance of powers are. Because if you hear one side of it, it's like, well, Trump can't be doing all these cuts, or saying he's going to close down the Department of Education and all these things, because those are all been created by Congress and are funded by Congress. He is technically, some would say, just supposed to be administering those things, right? Mm-hmm. And so those seem like fundamental constitutional arguments. I mean, on the other side of it, they're saying, well, if he's supposed to be running the show, then he's got to have some latitude in what it's like, So in my mind, it's like, what a great opportunity to really finally establish kind of what it is. And it just seems like it's just getting bounced all over the place, all of them.
Yeah. And as I say, you and I seem to be exactly on the same page. That it's like, okay, this thing has finally made its way up to the Supreme Court. Let's have some clarity. Let's decide what these issues are. How does this really work? Let's find out.
Right.
Make decisions on things that have never had these, faced these kind of challenges before. That's precisely what the Supreme Court is there to do. And then to just find some technicality and kick it down the road, it's like, because in 6 months it's going to be right back in the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to deal with it then. Why not just deal with it? So as they say, John Roberts, and here's the other thing. I'll make a prediction that everyone can see. When it finally makes its way back to the Supreme Court again, Roberts will try and throw it out with some kind of thing dealing with standing. It'll be this person doesn't have standing, that person doesn't have standing, the court was in the wrong jurisdiction. But it'll be some technical nonsense that will provide further no clarity on any of the issues that we actually need to find anything out about. And it will get recycled back again to come back a third or fourth time. And so it's just like, oh my God, it's like, how... Just make a ruling.
Sorry, I know.
These are important things, and
you're hitting on things
have my
so one of the
personal opinion on those things. I'm certainly no lawyer,
comes from is,
and understanding all these kinds of things about
determining
what seems to me would make sense on these things. But I know there's a lot of technical, nuancy stuff that the law tries to address, but until you actually get a decision, you really don't know
how we do things.
To as close as you can get to a black and white decision. So we're just going to continue to plod along. I mean, you can kind of say that with a lot of things that are going on right now. I mean, it's on again, off again. That's just the name of the game right now. I mean, it's like the tariff, and it's like, I mean. And all, like I think I said in the last one, I'm just, I do think, I'm still even more convinced now that, another month or two and it'll all melt down some way, somehow. I don't know how that is, but all the chaos that's going on it's just got to come to a head pretty quickly. And I know that's kind of the strategy Trump's taking in some of this, but, I don't know how good it is for the government, or I mean, I should say the country overall.
Yeah. As I say, it's a tricky one, but again, when the Supreme Court sort of just kicks the can down the road and avoids, doing its job essentially, you really are just adding to the chaos because eventually there's going to be more and more of a backlog of things. And, it's going to get to some point where the court's going to be like, oh, well, we're so backlogged, we can't get to this. And it's like, well, that's a problem. You should have dealt with it when it first came across your desk and just been done with it. So, as I say, I find those things incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, but through all this, in fact, I've kind of poked a few of my Democratic friends over this is, through it all, it's called to me anyways, all the more reason that both of these mega political parties, Republicans and Democrats, are such a disaster. It's really up to independents to get enough organization together and clout together to kind of help sort through this stuff, because it's like,
so does Texas have,
on one hand you got Trump just spinning every plate that he can spin. On the other side, one of the Democrats is like,
vote for judges.
Well, if you disagree with it, what the heck are you trying to do about it? And I mean, raising their little placards. I didn't watch the Trump thing.
No.
I couldn't do it, but I've seen enough little clips, and they're raising up their little protest circle paddles. They probably make great fans, when it's warm. It's like, really, this is all you're gonna do if you really think, and it's just such a lack of leadership or quality leadership in my mind on both sides, and it's really just calling for some independents to step up and try and bring so many people together, because I think everybody's just sick of it and frustrated.
Yeah, I think actually the microcosm of that we're seeing now is the idea behind the Ukrainian deal. Mm-hmm. It's like whatever the Ukrainian deal ends up being, however it goes down, it's going to be messy. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There are going to be things that could be good and things that could be bad, and there'll be plenty of disagreement on it. And Trump is pushing really hard because his position now and what he's proposing is to basically just put an end to the war at any cost to the Ukraine, seemingly. I mean, obviously, another thing that annoys me about that conversation is that clearly we don't know exactly what Trump would finally negotiate when all was said and done.
Right.
So, again, we're all just guessing at this point. But it's like the Democrats, again, they're not suggesting anything.
Right.
You know, it's like, okay, you don't like what Trump is doing. So what is your proposal to end the war in the Ukraine? Or is it literally something that's just going to go on forever, like, you know, basically like World War I, where you just have two sets of trenches blowing each other to pieces? So, right. As I say, that's the thing. You know, where's the leadership proposing something that could be different or better? Which is why you need more parties. Exactly. There needs to be somebody, because if the Democrats can't step up and say something worthwhile and contribute to the argument, then there should be another party that can.
Yep.
So,
well, the irony of it is that the Ukraine thing is the one place where I actually think people could come together on. I mean, who's in favor of having the war continue? I mean, it's like
no, it's crazy.
That's like insane, right? So the one I'm actually more optimistic in a way about the Ukraine situation because number one, Europe is stepping up big time. I think they basically have said we can't rely on the U.S. for anything anymore. So but it's in their backyard, right? So which is, you know, I see as a positive sign that it's like, hey, good, don't depend on the U.S. Now, U.S. should be involved, and I'm saddened by kind of the abrupt nature of it all. But at the same time, it's like this war does have to end somehow, some way, and make sure you're not, you know, rewarding the aggressor. But at the end of the day, it has been a war, and you know, none of these things end perfectly or pretty, to your point. And there's probably going to be some piece of this that's not going to look, you know, that Ukraine's going to be real happy about. But as long as hopefully they spend some time, and I think that's what Europe is really trying to do now. It sounds like is to let's end this thing, but let's put safeguards in so Russia doesn't turn around and try it again. And you know, because they're going to lose on this bigger than we are by far.
Well, the thing is, I think that Trump went into office with an idea that he either wanted to get out of Ukraine or get paid by Ukraine, and I don't think he necessarily cares which option it is.
Yeah.
So if the Ukraine wants to just rely on Europe for its armaments and its peace deal, you know, it's going to be a stagnation anyway. The Russians do not seem to have any real capacity to move further into Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't seem to have any capacity to move into Russia. So you're going to get a stalemate. And so I think from Trump's perspective, if he's out of the situation completely, that's a win.
Totally.
ICE is running out of beds and they're opening up all kinds of things.
And that, again, that's where I think it's just so crazy that all the parties, and I'm talking about in the U.S., Democrats, Independents, Republicans, can't come together on this one because it's just like nobody wants us to keep going. Yet at the same time, you want to, you know, defend or help an ally and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just like perfect example is like this is so dysfunctional now. You can't agree about ending the war. Okay. You can't agree on that. How are we going to agree on anything? It's just like,
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why it's the perfect microcosm for things because it's like it's just crazy.
Yeah. So and all the more reason why, like you said, third parties could play such a role in this now, and you know. I wrote when the whole Ukraine thing happened, you know, I messaged a few people and you know, because I still generally am supportive of Ukraine. I think it's awful what they've been going through. at the same time, it's like the Democrats can't just continue to say, "Hey, we're going to write a blank check," and
Right.
so we've at least moved it to the point of talking about trying to figure out a way out of this. It's not been pretty. I don't really agree with the approach that was made, but at least people are at least trying to talk about a ceasefire at a minimum and ending the war altogether.
Yeah. No, it's going to be interesting too in 3 or 4 years, because I think, first of all, the Democrats are revealing themselves as a party fundamentally devoid of any idea of anything. At least that's how they look right now.
Right.
But once Trump is out of the picture in 3 or 4 years, I mean, I'm not sure that the Republican Party has any ideas either. And Trump is a one-off. I think that's the one thing that people need to completely understand. Trump is Trump. When Trump is gone, all Trumpy things go with him. Whether you like that or hate that, that's what's going to happen. And then, somehow these two awful parties that we're stuck with are going to have to try and sort out some kind of position on things. And again, it's like their demise in some ways to me is heartening, but it's also incredibly disappointing because I feel like it's too bad that no third thing came along earlier that could step up and be like, okay, both of these degenerate old parties that don't have an idea about anything, go off to the left and right. We're going to start suggesting ideas, start talking about how to take care of things and how to start doing things in a different way that actually works for the American people. And as I say, right now, it's grim, but it could be worse.
Yeah, well, like I said, let's give it another month or two. I hate to be pessimistic about that part, but I'm not real optimistic. I'm actually optimistic about the Ukraine thing. I think that's kind of slowly making its way to an end. But the rest of the stuff going on is like, oh my gosh, it's like tariffs on, tariffs off. It's like, I thought during the election, the number one thing was the economy, and we got to get costs under control. And there's almost zero conversation about any of that. It's about all these international things, again, very important, or about migration. One could argue, well, if you don't get migration under control, that's an economic issue, no question. But that has such a long-term effect because we're still not going to immigration reform. All we're doing is trying to stop people from coming, which is not immigration reform. And so it's like, okay, so what are we talking about? I mean, how are you bringing down the cost of anything right now?
I think that the Trump administration is going to put a lot of its faith in two things: lowering the cost of energy, which theoretically should lower the cost of just about everything, and extending the tax cuts, which should put more money in the pockets of the moneyed class, let's say, or taxpayers generally, and their ability to sort of fuel the economy. But how quickly that takes effect, to the degree it takes effect as far as lowering prices, it's going to be hard to say. But I'm pretty sure that that's what they're gambling on. They're saying that if we do those two things, we eventually get costs to come down, and then we'll just have to see if that actually happens.
Yeah, well, and again, there's so many layers to this. It's like, I think, who was it? Chevron, I think, is making a bunch of taking and doing a lot of layoffs. And one other is decided they're not going to do any more drilling. It's not a question of the volume of oil and stuff that we can get our hands on. It's out there if we really wanted to do it, but there's no incentive for them to do it. So it's like, well, let's hope the gas prices go down, but rarely do things go down after they've gone up. Right now it's just like trying to keep it, okay, don't go up anymore and let other things catch up. So, it's like banking on, hey, we're just going to have a bunch of more wells drilled. It's like, okay, good luck with that.
Well, exactly, because I think that's where a flaw in a lot of the reasoning is, and this is why I'm always pushing so hard for nuclear energy. Have a more diverse energy supply,
Yep.
because traditionally what happens is, producers of oil and gas find a point at about which their production is sort of maximizing their profits, and then
Yep.
it's no longer in their interest to try and produce more.
Right.
What we need to do is we need to get really, really, really cheap energy. We need to get energy costs down so that all the energy intensive things that we do, have the energy that they need at a low cost. So one of the things about building a lot of nuclear plants would be that, first of all, the nuclear producers would be incentivized because they can make a lot of money by producing electricity early because they're introducing competition into the energy market. But, you got to have, this baseline energy supply to run everything. And then as, energy needs expand, that increases the market for more and more energy, and you can actually get those things done. But I'm not sure how cooperative the oil and gas producers are going to be, with nothing pushing against them, that they basically control the market, that they're going to want to do things that are going to lower the cost of energy, because that's not necessarily in their best interest. So I think the fact that the Trump administration is betting on those kind of things is a bit dubious. So again, we'll have to wait and see how much success they can actually get out of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then you combine all the other stuff, whether it's solar or wind or whatever. Everybody's in it for themselves, which I get. Hey, we're in a capitalist society. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
So I totally get that, but because we do need, ironically, we are going to need even more energy than ever.
Right.
But there's really no, there's a ton of solutions, but none that have become practical enough or acceptable enough among the mass public to allow it to happen. That's the whole irony of some of the chaos going on right now.
I wonder,
with the whole tariffs and all
is
that
the better
stuff,
approach
and all the different programs that are being closed down. It's like, I'm still trying to figure out where, and I know he's a smart guy, so he's been thinking about it. He knows what he's doing. But where Elon Musk figures out he's going to win
forces them down the road
in terms of Tesla. Now, for SpaceX, pretty clear how he's going to win, because he basically owns the space market at this point.
That one's already in the win column.
Yeah. Realistically, he is NASA for all intents and purposes at this point. But on the electric car stuff, there's so much more competition, and they're killing all the programs to build the infrastructure that's needed, basically, to make that really happen. It's like, man, what is the long-term play in this one for him? Because Tesla cells have just tanked. And in China, which is the second largest market for Tesla, they've gone down by 50%. It's just wow. But clearly he didn't get to where he got by doing stupid stuff. So maybe there's something here that I'm just not seeing, but I don't see it in that one.
Well, so here's my take on Tesla, and I've always felt this way, and I felt this way about Elon Musk sort of in general for a long time. First of all, I acknowledge that he's a genius and he's done amazing business things. There's no getting around that. But I feel like with Tesla, his business model was built entirely around subsidies.
Oh, totally.
The reason that he could do what he did was he could get more money from the government than anyone else, and every time he did something, the government voted to give him more money. Yep. And so that car industry was being subsidized because the government wanted to create an electrical car market, even though there isn't really an electric car market. And so that business, I think, survived entirely on government subsidies. And without the government subsidies, I think it actually is going to be in big trouble. Because there's one thing that I want to add. The first electric cars were built in the 1800s. And, you could get one that drove around on a battery, didn't have good range, and it took a long time to recharge and whatever. But they built electric cars.
Yep.
And for a while, internal combustion engine cars and electric cars were sort of competing with each other for which is the one that people will like and find more practical.
Yep.
People rejected electric cars in favor of internal combustion engine cars. So knowing that, the only way that electrical cars are going to overtake internal combustion cars is if something comes along that makes electrical cars so much better than internal combustion engine cars that people suddenly want electrical cars instead of internal combustion engine cars. And the problem is, nothing like that has happened. Batteries are somewhat better. Ranges are somewhat better. You know, it's nice to have a lot of computers and stuff in your car, but the electric car is still essentially the same as it was in 1890.
No, it is. No, it isn't a revolutionary leap. It's been kind of, you could say, I guess, incrementally, it's been a bit of an improvement if you're worried about things like, you know, climate change and things like that. But outside of that, it serves the same function, and it doesn't serve it as well, generally speaking, in terms of you can't drive from here to, you know, the Bay Area very easily in most of them without, you know, spend a lot of time waiting for it to recharge. And so, yeah, no, I know. And I mean, I still think we're on the cusp of any major breakthrough, and with the batteries in particular. And maybe it can get there, but will people lose interest by then? Will something else come along? I always still wonder why hydrogen cars never took off, other than that right now they're so expensive. But again, that comes down to an infrastructure issue more than anything.
Yep. Okay, so
and it's like,
it's funny that we start talking about this.
Makes a lot more sense than electric.
Yeah, this is one of the things that just bugs me to no end. So, there were electric cars, and there were fuel cell cars. And the fuel cell cars weren't necessarily running on hydrogen initially, and then, you know, the hydrogen fuel cells came along a little bit after. And so it looked for a while when hybrids were really the thing, and, you know, they were still working on the full electric, you know, rolling out the full electric stuff. You know, basically before Tesla. It looked like there was going to be a real competition between electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles. And I was psyched, because I was like, there's no question that the fuel cell cars are going to win. And we're going to get this big hydrogen infrastructure. In fact, next to my old place in Los Angeles, there was a gas station that was starting to equip itself to provide hydrogen fuel. Yeah. They built this whole top deck with all these tanks and everything on it that was going to be for the hydrogen. And then the government stepped in and said, we want electric cars.
Yeah.
And all the money and all the effort and everything went into electric cars, which basically birthed Tesla. But because all that money and all the subsidies and all the profitability was in electric cars, the fuel cell market never took off the way it should. Right. It got stomped down by government interference. It's a classic example of why centralized government thinking is a bad idea. So now we're stuck with a bunch of electric cars that people don't want, and infrastructure that's insufficient for their needs, where honestly, if we'd left things alone, we would now have a hydrogen economy.
To talk the way you do, because in many respects, I feel
like has so many benefits to it.
Oh my God.
As far as the infrastructure part of it, the problem with electric cars is it's actually hurting our electrical infrastructure, because we can't build stuff fast enough and all that. Hydrogen just stands outside of that. You don't even have to worry about it. And a lot of the existing facilities can be retrofitted,
or even the ability to change
relatively easily.
Relatively
easy. I'm not saying it's easy,
so
but
I really appreciate that you're
compared to putting in literally a whole new grid.
Many factors are really involved in these things. So
like,
that's something that we talk about
holy
on this
crap.
podcast.
And it's like, I don't know, maybe it'll happen.
As I say,
maybe that's going to be.
I'm just sort of curious if you
maybe next week Musk will be launching a new initiative for hydrogen cars. Who knows?
You know, we just need a greater expanse of ideas.
Honestly, I hope he does.
I
really do hope he does.
Homelessness problems.
Yeah.
Education.
You know, because it's
let's
if you just let it go, because most of the incentives and subsidies are going away. It sounds like
you know,
electrical the
desperation of people and
that's to your point. That's no doubt that's what drove it. I mean, when we were looking at them,
and then once that all those
it was like, okay, well, let's do the math. You get the $7,500 thing, and blah blah.
In a way that's
right.
Fair,
you know,
but also protects society.
But it wouldn't have been a consideration without that.
All that stuff. I mean,
right. And then you would have started seeing independent manufacturers start producing fuel cell cars,
Yep.
And honestly, fuel cell cars are amazing because,
yeah.
they have all the advantages of an electric car because they essentially are an electric car
Yep.
with the refuelability of an internal combustion engine car.
Exactly.
And the fact that the fuel would be hydrogen, which you can make with a tank of water and a solar panel. I mean, my God.
I know.
It would have been amazing.
It was just like mind-boggling. And, it's,
Yes.
in essence, a renewable resource in the respect that it just goes up into water vapor, basically. And
rains back down.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know.
And the other thing you can do with fuel cells.
Say again?
Oh, I was going to say the other thing you can do with fuel cells is you can put them in airplanes. See, the problem with making like an electric plane is that you need such an enormous weight of batteries that scaling up the electric motors to get enough power to take the plane off the ground, it's not practical.
Yeah.
But if you can put a fuel cell in a plane and then run an electric prop off of the fuel cell, electric plane. And it's an electric plane that produces zero emissions because it's all just water vapor.
Right.
So wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I know. Again, from that perspective, I think it is kind of interesting that hopefully it starts to bring more imagination back to the country, and people start thinking, through all this chaos. And maybe it's one of those things where you have to go through the chaos to get through to that breakthrough kind of stuff. So I try and remain optimistic. I just know the next few months are going to be sheer torture. So, if the last 6 weeks is any, proof of that.
What is it? If the best predictor of future results is past precedent or something like that.
Yeah, right. So, but it, not much we can do about it at the moment. So, well, like I said, hopefully there'll be some, and that happens a lot, right? Consequences that you didn't see coming, and maybe those are good ones.
Yeah. So. Well, as I say, keep your fingers crossed. I think there's a lot of solutions for things. We never even got to talk too much about Social Security, but I'll bring that up again at some point. But there's so many solutions to things that could happen that I just feel like, and in some ways I feel like maybe we're on the precipice of this happening. People just have to discard the old bad ideas, including the two-party system, and move forward with the better ideas, get more ideas into the system, more free speech, more freedom, more entrepreneurship, more of all of that. And, the ideas will come, the innovations will come, and I think there are solutions out there. But we have to get past this old, broken down BS political system we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's just amazing. It was like, and we need to wrap it up here. But as always, the other night, let's see, what was it? Was it I think, when the controversy was going over about the tariffs, I just it's a sickness, but I was switching through between MSNBC and Fox. And I was just like, it's like, oh my God, this is just like, oh, you people, you're just in two freaking different worlds. We are on one planet.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it by watching those two, though. It's like, holy crap.
It's crazy.
It is. All right, man. Well, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Yeah, and hopefully next week I won't be on my phone. I'll be on an actual real computer.
hey, now we're good. Maybe switch over to my phone.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week.
Yep. Bye.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that point because we essentially incentivize